Ladies, gentlemen, all those outside and in between, welcome to another episode of RenFare, a podcast dedicated to psychoanalyzing and critiquing media. I am your host, Connor Renfro, one half of From the Margins. Listen until the end for more ways to hear me and support the project. You know what colonization is, right? A foreign entity comes into a space that belongs to a native group and takes it for themselves, and the foreign entity abuses and exploits the native group for their benefit. Post-colonial criticism examines art through a lens that pays attention to colonialist structures. Who was here first? Who came next and took it? How did this second group change the story to make themselves not look bad? Cough, cough, Thanksgiving. What are the continuing consequences of colonization? This is a fun episode in a fun series about MTV's Teen Wolf. I'm going to approach some really heavy topics with a bit of levity, but I mean no disrespect. This analysis is in no way meant to make light of colonial transgressions in the Americas and Africa. Anytime I draw on those examples is to comment on a blind spot of the season writers, and not to parallel them in the season itself. Some premises for this episode. 1. Nature has rules that magic has to follow, just like science. This is something I established in the second half of Season 5, that the rules of magic have their own natural law. Most magic creatures have to abide certain laws like mountain ash barriers and pack dynamics. The ability to survive is about adapting to the balance between an inherent nature and an imposed order of modernity. 2. The supernatural precedes modern civilization. There's no grand origin myth in the lore of Teen Wolf, so I'm led to believe magic has existed in this world since the beginning. Ignoring the colonial origins of California, which I will discuss later, we do have evidence that the Hale family was foundational in the settling of Beacon Hills. Their insignias and totems are deeply woven into the setting of the town. Their architecture predates and influences that of the town, such as them having a vault beneath the high school and that one bank that has their runes all over it. In addition to the Hale family, we are also aware of several other wolf packs that have roamed northern California and shaped the supernatural culture of Beacon Hills, such as the packs once led by Decolonizing, Ennis, Kali, and Satomi. These wolves and several other supernatural entities were drawn to Beacon Hills by the Nemeton tree, itself the beacon which draws them. The Argents, the family of hunters, originate in France and did a brief stint in Beacon Hills 6 years prior to the first season, but I understand them to be traveling mercenaries rather than fixtures of the town. If I'm not mistaken, they actually lived in San Francisco, or maybe it was Seattle. I get the S names confused in my head. Number 3. Beacon Hills is basically a fallen empire. Teen Wolf is a work of post-apocalyptic fiction. The flashback scenes we got in the first 3 seasons were really the downfall of a golden age of werewolves. Kate Argent massacred the Hale family, and Deucalion dissolved the other packs to take their alphas for himself. In this final episode, I will be examining how human society has colonized the supernatural in Teen Wolf's setting, and how brutal oppression and marginalization mentioned throughout the series, but brought to a head here, impact the plot. I will also critique how the analogy suffers from the appropriation of colonial narratives with no critical examination of how the writers might be whitewashing history for the purposes of fiction. At the end of the first half, the main cast graduated high school. This half picks up after the summer, at the beginning of their underclassmen's senior year. Scott, the main character and true alpha, is about to go to veterinary school. Lydia, the beautiful and intelligent banshee, is set to do some kind of advanced math degree program. Malia, the were-coyote and daughter of the alpha who bit Scott, is skipping college to visit Paris. but all of their plans are interrupted when Lydia has a premonition of great danger. A new hellhound named Halwyn escapes from Eichenhaus, seeking something that Scott let out when he rescued everybody from the wild hunt. Tamora Monroe, the new guidance counselor, kills Halwyn before the pack can learn about the creature he was hunting. Okay, so Teen Wolf has a weird history with its guidance counselors. First, we had Marin Morell, a druid with dubious allegiances who really only existed to deliver information to the students. For a while, Lydia's mom was the guidance counselor and a chemistry teacher, and now she's the principal of the school. The latest guidance counselor, like Morell, is a black woman who has ulterior motives. I want to point out that in this latest season, we're seeing a lot more diversity in the recurring characters, but I'm skeptical as to how well it's implemented. Not to beat a dead horse or anything, but Beacon Hills exists in a world with no bigotry or prejudice beyond the oppression of shapeshifters, so it would make sense for people of color to simply exist in various roles. However, the existence of different ethnic groups in Northern California itself is a consequence of colonialism. The westward expansion of European settlers into California came at the expense of the indigenous peoples, which don't have great representation in this series, though their beliefs and traditions influence the setting greatly. The white settlers brought with them African slaves. The conquest of Mexico, which formed much of the western United States, would account for the large Hispanic and Latinx population, and a considerable East Asian immigration happened in the region as well. We will always live in the shadow of colonialism, and to create a post-prejudice utopia, while admirable on its surface, only highlights the contradictions. Racist structures built California. I think that's why I prefer to use the term post-race when discussing Teen Wolf's setting. The bad things had to have existed to shape the world we presently dwell in, and the utopia begs us to pretend that the surface level problems all resolved without the structural change that should have also accompanied it. And I just keep coming back to Kira and the season with Japanese internment camps. How Davis brings up this horrible moment of racial oppression as setting and character motive, but doesn't engage any deeper into it. He wants his Japanese character to have a Japanese connection to the plot, but doesn't engage very deeply at all because it would shatter the colorblind fantasy of his narrative. It's dawning on me how so much of history just exists as atomized events in people's minds and not as interconnected systems. And these are the things you have to deal with in post-colonial criticism. But back to Tamora Monroe. She is a guidance counselor, a black woman, and a hunter. Davis really has a lot of issues with guidance counselors. Morell was actually cool because, of course, a wise druid who guides the hero in a high school setting would be the guidance counselor. But Lydia's mom was completely ineffectual and actually got in the pack's way with her moralizing and bureaucracy. She's the one who sent Lydia to the abusive Eichenhaus in the first place, which could be a larger commentary on psychiatric institutions as prisons. Now we have a complete subversion of the guidance counselor as an evil huntress who exploits her office to prey on vulnerable teens to root out her quarry. Monroe is also a black woman, which makes sense for this post-racial setting where the role of villain is open to anyone, but her inclusion in the institution of hunting, which itself is analogous to policing, slave hunting, and enforcement, tells me that either Davis is trying really hard to be edgy and subversive, which then makes me ask why, or he doesn't realize the implications of his own story. I like to default to the benefit of the doubt that he wants to be subversive, but why? Why make the black lady the oppressor? Why make her victims majority white? This digression was 3 pages long. Let's get back to the plot summary. Styles, the best friend and detective, begins his career as an FBI intern in Virginia. Baby, no! Don't be a cop! He discovers the FBI are pursuing Derek Hale, whom they believe is a mass murderer. Love that they're bringing Derek back for the last 10 episodes. Kind of forgot about him. So there's been some, rising tensions in the town, and Scott actually loses control of his shift and almost attacks Sheriff Stilinski. So we're bringing back control issues? I thought Scott was past all that. A student named Aaron is attacked by a swarm of spiders in the locker room. Liam, Scott's beta with anger issues, and Mason, Liam's best friend, find a faceless body in that same room later on. If you've been keeping track, you knew that Liam had a girlfriend named Hayden, but she's gone now. She moved away because, sorry Liam, don't you know, you're not allowed to have a girlfriend on this show. They all move away. Chris Argent, the only good apple since his wife and daughter died, deduces that the Hellhound's killer is a new hunter. Speaking of new hunters, Monroe attacks Brett after figuring out he is a werewolf. So Brett and his sister Lori are minor recurring characters first introduced in the Deadpool plot in season 4. They were part of Satomi's pack, but I guess they all got wiped out. Brett flees from the fight after Gerard Argent, Chris Argent's dad, shows up and poisons him with an arrow. So Gerard, the patriarch of the entire Argent family, recruits Monroe because he sees in her potential to be a new hunter. And the rest of the pack realizes that something is making ordinary people of Beacon Hills afraid of the supernatural. Because fear and bigotry can't simply be part of society, right? There always has to be some intermediary force that turns people evil. Scott, Malia, Liam, and Lori try to find Brett. They track him into the tunnels that run underneath the town. Scott gets injured by a tripwire. Liam and Lori keep going to look for Brett, but Malia stays behind to take away Scott's pain so he can heal faster. And Scott reveals to her that he has developed romantic feelings for her. What? Liam and Lori find Brett, and then they escape the sewers, but Gerard had set a trap. Brett and Lori are hit by a truck as soon as they escape, and they die. Goodbye, recurring side characters. Liam's rage causes him to shift in front of many eyewitnesses. So the secret's out, buddy. Some new kid at school named Nolan stabs Mason's boyfriend Corey with a pin, and then Corey's injuries heal, so Corey gets outed as a supernatural creature. I've taken great pains in earlier episodes to establish that shapeshifters are analogs for marginalized communities in Teen Wolf. Beacon Hills has evolved beyond racism, sexism, and homophobia, so supernatural creatures are the new marginalized folks. Corey, a gay character, getting outed as a chimera definitely comes with a lot of baggage. Melissa, Scott's mom and the only employee of the hospital who hasn't been murdered, attempts to perform an autopsy on the faceless corpse. But she gets overwhelmed by terror that is emanating from the corpse, so she gets Argent to help her. Oh yeah, they're developing feelings for each other. Scott and Allison might not have worked out, but their parents are able to get it on, I guess. They remove a tissue sample from the body, but under whatever science they do, they discover that the corpse has no DNA. Aaron goes to the hospital and spits up a swarm of spiders onto the faceless corpse, and it comes back to life. Malia tries to tell Scott of her own feelings, but is unable to spark up the courage. Rumors about Liam's true nature spread through the school. Nolan leads the lacrosse team to beat Liam up to make him transform through anger, but he is able to resist the change. So Monroe, along with this new fear toxin that's spreading, is causing all the human students to form a mob. Last episode, I talked about the impact of Trump's campaign on the show. This half of the season aired almost a full year after the first, so a lot of the writers' fears about Trump's America are definitely showing up here. Liam learns Monroe is the new hunter, so Scott meets with her and Gerard for a peace treaty. Monroe reveals she was almost killed by the Beast of Gévaudan. This season seems to be really interested in callbacks and consequences. It's actually something that I appreciate. Villain motives, besides Gerard's, have always been revenge, and parts of the season's narratives have always been solving the mystery of the villain's backstory. But here, we have a character who is reacting to an event we're already familiar with. The show isn't asking us to learn new lore. Instead, we're recontextualizing past events with regards to the victims. And that's actually a problem I had with earlier seasons. Teen Wolf has always been bloody, with each season leaving behind a giant pile of corpses, and the setting never really adapted to the consequences of all these people dying. Now, in the final 10 episodes, we're seeing the normal people say, enough. We are tired of being terrorized by mysterious magical forces. Monroe is a reactionary, and she's being manipulated by Gerard's bloodlust. The faceless corpse attacks Scott's pack and the hunters. Parrish, who is another hellhound, is able to repel it. A young werewolf named Quinn gets shot by a deputy and seeks sanctuary with Scott. Deaton, the druid veterinarian, Mason, and Corey identify the Wild Hunt escapee as the Anukete, or Doubleface, a powerful creature from Native American mythology which feeds on the fear it creates. In the real legends, it's often described as an ogre, but can also be a human with two faces. One of the faces is really ugly, and looking at it paralyzes you so that the monster can murder you. Later in the season, we'll see the monster actually turn people into stone. Theo, the resurrected evil trickster, is attacked by a group of hunters. He's homeless now because no one loves him. Theo escapes along with Jiang and Tierney, the last survivors of Satomi's pack, but the trio are arrested for murder. Scott's pack go to the police station, but Monroe's hunters surround the precinct, demanding they hang over Jiang and Tierney, who killed some of her hunters to avenge Satomi. The Anukete increases everyone's fear. 2 deputies kill themselves. Scott's father, an FBI agent who has actually been recurring, but I've never mentioned him because he's done jack for the plot until now, arrives and makes a compromise with the hunters, taking Jiang and Tierney into FBI custody. The deputy who drives them away is loyal to Monroe, and he kills them. Scott's father persuades Scott's pack to flee Beacon Hills, but they only pretend to because they're going to fight back. I just want to take a quick break and remark on how bleak this season is. I'm not a fan of bringing back previous characters just to kill them off, like Satomi, Brett, and Lori. And then this whole business with Jiang and Tierney? The writers are pulling no punches. It's ethnic cleansing. Aaron, the kid with the spiders, identifies a were-coyote named Edgar in school and tests him by transferring one of his spiders into Edgar's body. Aaron is obviously one half of the Anukete, and he's looking for his other half, which is hidden in a shapeshifter's form. The real Aaron, I think, is actually the faceless lump of flesh in the hospital. The Anukete stole his face and his entire genetic architecture, and is using it to pass unperceived through the halls of the school. That's appropriation. The monster is colonization itself. Edgar is left to slowly die. Yikes. And Monroe has him killed by another student named Gabe, and this whole business deeply unsettles Nolan. Theo and Liam draw the hunters to an abandoned zoo so Scott can break into Gerard's armory while they're gone. But the Anukete is nearby, and it triggers Liam's anger, and Theo has to physically stop Liam from killing his classmate Nolan. Meanwhile, Scott and Malia break into the armory, but the weapons have been cleared out. They do find Zhang and Tierney's corpses, as well as a map of the world. But the armory's security system activates, which sucks all the oxygen out of the room. Scott and Malia nearly suffocate to death, but Lydia and Chris Argent manage to rescue them. And then the whole team regroups at Scott's house. Scott and Malia reveal their feelings for each other and kiss passionately, starting a relationship. That's what the episode summary on Wikipedia says. But the entire group also discovers that Gerard's map indicates the locations of all the Nemetons around the world. He plans to use them to wipe out all supernaturals, because the ultimate goal of colonization is to eradicate the other, to keep all the resources for your group. Gerard has given all his weapons to the people of Beacon Hills. Recall the episode on New Historicism and Trump's campaign? This is the fallout when fascism is allowed to fester in a liberal democracy. The hegemonic power has defined the in-group and the out-group, despite anyone's desire to peacefully coexist. Scott's house gets attacked by gunfire. Melissa, Mason, Raphael, and Lydia were all shot in the gunfire attack. The 4 people without healing abilities. Raphael is Scott's dad, by the way. Scott decides to form an army to combat Gerard's army. First, Malia recruits her father, Peter Hale, who joins after he sees that Malia is in love with Scott. Ooh. Gerard sends hunters to London, where Jackson and Ethan, who are now a couple, live together. Jackson was the jock bully who got possessed by the Kanima spirit in season 2. At the conclusion of that season, Lydia's love banished the spirit and he was able to become a werewolf. But now he's both? Like the show just rewrote its own lore? Like he still has the tail and the venom, the paralyzing venom, whatever. Ethan was the gay werewolf twin who had been involved with Danny, Jackson's best friend, who vanished from the series after season 3. And now the two of them are together? Isn't there like a bro code, like you don't date someone like your friend's ex? I don't know. Suspecting Gerard is responsible for the attack, they return to Beacon Hills to find Scott, but they get captured by Monroe. Oops. Scott and Malia also try to recruit another pack of werewolves known as the Primal, but find them all dead. They were killed by the Anukate. There's a second skinless corpse among them. The Anukate's second half has taken the form of a werewolf in order to gain its power. The pack also discovers that Aaron is the first half of the Anukate. Lydia sees a vision of the dead hellhound Halwyn, who reveals that she needs to find the other half of the Anukate before the two halves can find themselves. Lydia and Malia briefly revive Halwyn from the coma he's in. Right, Monroe didn't actually kill him. She put a silver bullet in his brain, and Lydia and Malia use hospital equipment like a magnet to extract it. He warns them of the Anukate's petrifying vision before the silver from Monroe's bullet poisons and finally kills him. Because the coma was keeping his blood from circulating through his brain, so when Lydia woke him up, the blood started flowing again and the silver got him. There is literally no happiness here. Mason and Theo track Aaron into the tunnels beneath the town. Scott and Liam trace a call on the dead primal werewolf's phone to the science teacher, Mrs. Finch, the alpha of the primal pack and Quinn's mother. This is the same science teacher from season 5 who taught them about the chimeras, and she's always been a little strict, and I guess now she's an alpha werewolf. Quinn, the other half of the Anukate by the way, attacks Scott, Liam, and her mother. Theo, in the tunnels, wounds Aaron in a fight, and Quinn can feel that pain from her other half. This causes Aaron and Quinn to find each other, and they merge into the complete Anukete. The two halves actually fight each other for control of the joined form. First, they kiss each other quite erotically and share their spiders with each other, but then they start choking each other. In the end, Aaron, the human male, overcomes Quinn, the werewolf female, by violently snapping her neck, and her spiders crawl into his body, which turns into the complete Anukete. I don't think that detail has anything to do with the Anukete, despite being an interesting, albeit disturbing, bit of lore. Exploring the thin line between sex and violence, that battle for domination, is very appealing to me, but this precise instance is a little gratuitous, and it doesn't contribute to the story. I guess I can see it as a microcosm of all the conflicts I've noticed so far in the series. The domination of men over women, of mortal over supernatural, how a human werewolf coupling is inherently doomed. I don't know. It's hard to tell what meaning is imbued in this really random moment that the writers probably didn't think too much about. It does nothing to enhance the story. It was just a shocking image. Back at the house, Scott has sex with Malia, consummating their relationship. This is more of a critique of the Wikipedia article than the actual show. But why are the editors so into this pairing? It literally comes out of nowhere, because I guess you can't end the series with the main character not having a girlfriend. But the Wikipedia article just, I don't know, it goes out of its way to treat it like a consecrated canonical account. The relationship is initiated. The relationship is consummated. What the heck is going on? In Brazil, Chris Argent tracks down Derek, who is searching for yellow wolfsbane. Kate, it turns out she's allied with her father Gerard, and she's the one who framed Derek for mass murder because she just cannot leave this man alone. She shows up and she shoots them both, her ex and her own brother, and she takes the wolfsbane for herself to use against Scott. Gerard and Monroe distribute the weapons to most of Beacon Hill's population. Scott believes the townspeople's fear and hatred is not real, and that the war can be averted by destroying the Anukete. He and Malia get Decolonizing to teach them to fight without sight, so they can defeat the Anukete. Lydia has a vision of her friends turned to stone, so I guess the plan doesn't work. So Lydia goes to track down Scott and warn him, but she's too late. Monroe and her hunters arrive and they open fire, killing Decolonizing. What? You literally brought back the demon wolf just to kill him with machine guns? You could have just not had him come back. And I'm gonna go ahead and spoil the ending, but his training does absolutely nothing. You think it's really clever, right? Seeing the Anukete turns you to stone, so you learn to fight without looking. So it actually makes sense to have the guy who used to be blind come back and teach them, and this is really important for the plot. Well, nope, it does nothing. It's stupid. The whole thing is ridiculous. Nolan betrays the hunters because you can't have a white boy not go good and redeem himself, I guess. And he leads Liam to the hospital to find some captured werewolf hostages. But this is a trap that Monroe set, knowing full well Nolan planned to betray her. So now Liam, Mason, and Corey are trapped in the hospital and the hunters are closing in. Time for the last episode. Stiles and Derek return to help Scott and the others. Gerard broadcasts a message to the pack, which reveals the location of Jackson, Parrish, Liam, Agent McCall, Mason, and Corey. Basically everybody who's not accounted for. Like, he's saying, yo, I got your friends. And then, I don't know, they split up and go to execute the final plan. Peter goes to fight the Anukete, but he looks at it and he turns into stone. Great. Thanks for your help, Peter. Lydia and Stiles go to rescue Jackson. And for a second, you think it's going to be awkward when they all reunite. because Jackson and Lydia used to date, but now Lydia and Styles are together. But actually, Lydia's overjoyed that Jackson, quote, finally realized he's gay. This might be a nod to the complicated path Jackson's actor, Colton Haynes, took coming out as gay after being closeted for much of his modeling and acting career. At the same time, it rewrites the canon of the first 2 seasons, showing that Lydia knew damn well her abusive boyfriend was gay, but she was still all over him. Actually, it is hinted that Jackson might be bisexual, as there's a scene where he checks out a girl and a boy, but of course the show is never going to use the word bisexual. And there's no social stigma around being gay in Beacon Hills, which means everyone would be free to explore that part of themselves. So that just makes Jackson look really stupid, which is accurate, or Lydia really bad for keeping him all to herself and not letting him explore himself, even though she knew damn well he liked boys. But that too is accurate to her character at the start of the series, before she learned to stop being so mean. In conclusion, I'm not all that mad about it. Jackson had a lot of toxic masculinity issues, so it's nice to know that he had some character development off screen and came back in touch with his anima. Liam and Theo face off against the hunters at the hospital. Yeah, there's been like this subplot about how the two of them hate each other, but because they kept being paired off in this last season, they became like good friends, and I ship it. The rest of the pack is at the school for the final showdown with the Anukate. Monroe arrives at the school and shoots Scott with yellow wolfsbane, which weakens him, I guess. The Anukate, meanwhile, turns everyone into stone, one by one, rendering their involvement in the plot absolutely nil. Why did they even bother coming back? They do not serve a purpose, and Jeff Davis's favorite trope or motif or whatever returns for the final time. That's right, it's hallucination time! Since the Anukate uses fear as a weapon, it has to get inside its victim's head to make them open their eyes. The only notable example I can remember is Derek. The Anukate takes the shape of Jennifer Blake, the Durach from 3A, to try and get Derek to open his eyes. It's more seduction than fear, I think. I mean, it is scary, because Derek is a sexual assault survivor, and Jennifer was the last in a long line of women manipulating and molesting him. And this brief scene also means we get to have the actress do a cameo for the last episode. This is bonkers, right? They're bringing back so many people. But not Allison. I guess she's dead, but they have other dead people coming back. They don't bring back Corey, not Isaac, not Danny, not Kira. Kira's mom made a cameo in the first half of the season. Not Brayden, who actually had a lot to do in the last season. And now I'm wondering if she and Derek are even still together. Not Morel, after her out-of-place appearance at Eichen House in season 4. Oh well. Final battle time. Are you ready to hear how our hero Scott destroys his ultimate nemesis? Scott faces off against the Anukate in the library. He has to keep his eyes closed so he doesn't turn to stone like the rest of the cast. The Anukate tempts him by summoning villains from the past, an Oni, a Berserker, and even the Nogitsune, who reminds Scott of Allison. Aw, sad. Scott knows he won't be able to resist the temptation much longer, so he claws out his own eyes to prevent himself from seeing the Anukate. So now we're expecting him to trade blows with the monster, using the skills he learned from Decolonizing, right? He tells the Anukate, I know you're part werewolf now, which means you're a shapeshifter, just like me. And we shapeshifters have certain rules we must follow. cut to a scene of Chris Argent facing off against his father and sister, where he tells them Scott has a plan, because Scott always has a plan. And Gerard, in a callback to his final words in season 2, cries, "Mountain Ash!" And back at the library, Styles bursts into the scene and lobs a jar of mountain ash at the Anukete, looking right at it without turning to stone, and the mountain ash hits the monster and he disappears in a cloud of smoke and he's gone. It's over. All the petrified people turn back to normal. The citizens of Beacon Hills stop being bigoted because it was all just evil magic, not innate prejudice or anything. Malia gives Scott a big old kiss and his eyes grow back, even though he didn't have to claw them out in the first place. Chris Argent turns Kate and Gerard against each other, and the two of them die fighting each other in the bunker. Monroe and her hunters retreat, and Beacon Hills is saved. And then, in a flash forward, Scott and every member of his pack gather up to stop Monroe in whatever latest scheme she has devised. I'm ambivalent about this ending. On one hand, I wanted Monroe to break free of Gerard's manipulation and realize how wrong-headed she was. I wanted at least one female villain to get a redemption arc on this show, and the fact that she is still evil and this aggression between hunters and werewolves is eternal really felt like the final season keeping itself open for the possibility of a reboot in the future. On the other hand, the biggest critique I had with the Anukete is how it created the town's bigotry with its fear toxin, which makes it seem like bigotry and prejudice in our world have similar causes, which they don't. Oppression is a baked-in feature of our society, and battling ignorance is a great way to combat it, but ignorance is not the cause. It is a factor that allows the oppression to continue, but never mistake it for the reason oppression exists in the first place. By showing that Monroe is actually committed to the hunting of werewolves completely separate of the Anukete's influence, the show allows for the possibility that some people are just evil. They don't want to share their resources. They believe in their inherent superiority to the marginalized group, and they want to eradicate that group. But Monroe, as an example, doesn't really work because she was a victim of the Beast of Gévaudan, and she was radicalized because of her victimhood. So if anything, she is one of the ignorant reactionaries. It's complicated. Despite all the fan service, the cameos, the callbacks, this was probably the bleakest season of Teen Wolf. And the ending is likewise dreary. This aggression will never end. Some hunters have learned to coexist with the supernatural, but hunters will always want to kill them, and Scott will always be ready to rise up to the challenge, which is why he's the hero. But in real life, don't marginalized people deserve the chance to just relax? Don't they deserve the right to not be marginalized? The ending isn't heroic, it's tragic. They're never going to have normal lives. I mean, normal is a loaded term because more than half the lead cast is a supernatural being. But normalcy, it was always the privileged state in the show. Scott wants to go to college and become a vet. He wants to exist as a human. He's not mad that he's a shapeshifter, but he has no desire to live as the Hales did, secluded in their giant house and rarely interacting with the rest of the city. And he's never going to get to have that chance because he has to keep fighting off these threats from hunters and other evil people. That's all I have to say about this right now. This is already my longest script, and it's not even the longest season of the series. I'm probably going to make a final episode with commentary on the series as a whole, so consider that my real conclusion. I just really need a break from Teen Wolf. Thank you for listening to RenFare. I hope you'll join me next time. RenFare is available to listen wherever you find your podcasts. If you like this content and want to hear more, feel free to follow me on Spotify, Anchor.fm, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Free Public, Bullhorn, and several others. RenFare is also uploaded to the From the Margins YouTube channel that I share with my content partner Violet Knight. You can join us there to hear us discuss current events and our own interests. If you feel so inclined, you can join the discussion by becoming a member of our Patreon to support the growing channel. From the Margins with Violet and Connor is also available to stream on the audio platforms I listed above. Please check us out there as well. Until next time.